Welcome to Beauty in Stories. This is a space where short, meaningful tales invite us to explore life's deep lessons and the beauty of emotions. Each story becomes a journey to listen, reflect, and rediscover values that are often overlooked in the busyness of life. Join us as we uncover inspiration, joy, and connection in these stories every day. And now, let's dive into today's story, The Love of the Swan.
My second year of college was about to end. On a hot night during the last week of May, I got a call from my mom at the dorm. She told me I'd be spending the summer at my grandparents' farm to help with the work. The idea pleased everyone in the family. As for me, I wasn't entirely convinced but consoled myself by thinking, it's just one summer. After finishing my last exam, I packed my things, got in the car, said goodbye to my friends, and promised to see them in the fall. Most of my friends were heading home too. It took 3 hours to drive from my college to the farm. My grandparents were both in their 70s, and I knew they needed help. Grandpa couldn't handle all the chores alone, like hauling hay or fixing fences, along with the endless list of other tasks. I arrived late that evening. Grandma had cooked so much food that the three of us couldn't possibly finish it all. She was incredibly loving and attentive to her grandchild. I thought this warm welcome would fade once I stayed with them longer, but it didn't. Grandpa wanted to know everything about me. By bedtime, I felt reassured after all. It was just one summer. The next morning, Grandpa prepared breakfast for both of us, saying Grandma was tired from working hard the day before and needed to rest. I decided I wouldn't let her do anything for me during my stay. I was here to help, not to be a burden. That morning, Grandpa surprised me. Once we stepped outside, he seemed full of life and energy. The farm was his domain. Despite his age, he moved with confidence, knowing every corner of the place. Gone was the man who had dozed off in his chair the night before the 6 o'clock news ended. As we walked through the gate to check on the cattle, it was clear Grandpa recognized each cow in the herd. Nearly 200 of them. We didn't do much on the first day, but I was amazed by everything Grandpa had accomplished over the years. Even before I was born, with little formal education, he had raised 4 children and supported the family with this farm. I was deeply impressed by his life's work. Weeks went by. By June, we had gathered the hay, tied it into bundles, and stored it in the barn. I got used to working with Grandpa every day. He always had the tasks planned out, and we tackled them bit by bit. In the evenings, I often read books or chatted with Grandma. She never tired of hearing stories about my school life or anything about me. She also shared stories about her youth, how she met Grandpa, the love he had for her, and the way she still remembered the look in his eyes when they first met. On the last Sunday of June, Grandpa suggested we go fishing since all the work was done. The pond was in a low-lying field near the woods. Years earlier, Grandpa had stocked it with fish. That day, we drove to the pond, stopping to check on the cattle along the way. We didn't expect what we saw that morning. One of the swans Grandpa had gifted Grandma for their golden wedding anniversary had died. The other swan refused to eat, gazing into the distance as if looking for something far away. "Why don't we get another swan to replace it?" I suggested, hoping to fix the situation. Grandpa paused before replying.
No, it's not that simple. You see, swans only have one mate for life.
He pointed to the pond while holding his fishing rod in the other hand. With other animals,
Maybe it's possible, but not swans. You could bring another swan to it, but you couldn't replace the soul it had loved and understood. There's nothing we can do for it. It has to find its own way.
that morning, we caught enough fish for lunch. On the drive back, Grandpa asked me not to tell Grandma about the swan. She didn't visit the pond much anymore, so there was no point in upsetting her. A few days later, while checking the cattle, we passed by the pond again. The surviving swan lay motionless in the same spot where its mate had been found. It had died too. In early July, Grandpa and I began building a new fence. On July 12th, Grandma passed away. That morning, I overslept, and Grandpa didn't knock on my door to wake me. Around 8 a.m., I hurriedly got dressed and went to the kitchen, where Dr. Morgan, their retired neighbor, was sitting at the table. He'd been a family friend for years and often visited when needed. The sight of his old black bag and Grandpa's trembling hands told me something was wrong. Grandma had died suddenly of a stroke. My parents arrived that afternoon, followed by relatives and friends. The funeral was held the next day because Grandpa insisted it happen quickly. 2 days later, during breakfast, he said,
This is a busy farm. We still have a lot of work to do. Everyone should get back to their own responsibilities.
Most of the family left soon after lunch, as if Grandpa's words had been his way of telling them it was time to go. My parents were the last to leave. Grandpa wasn't one to easily show his pain, but we were all worried about him. The family discussed encouraging him to give up the farm. My parents thought he was too old to live alone there, but Grandpa wasn't interested in any of that. I was proud of how he stood his ground. The rest of the summer passed by, though we stayed busy with farm work. I sensed a subtle change in Grandpa but couldn't pinpoint what it was. I wondered if he might be better off living with someone else. But I knew he couldn't leave the farm. As September approached, I didn't want to leave. I even considered skipping the fall semester to stay with him a little longer. But when I brought it up, Grandpa firmly objected, saying,
Your place is at school, not here.
When the time came for me to leave, I packed my things, shook his hand, and hugged him goodbye. As I drove away, I looked back through the rearview mirror and saw him waving, then turning back to the fields to start his daily cattle inspection. That image of him remains etched in my memory. One stormy morning, my mom called my dorm to tell me Grandpa had passed away. A neighbor had stopped by for coffee and found him in the kitchen. He had died of a stroke, just like Grandma. In that moment, I finally understood what Grandpa had tried to teach me about the swan on that fishing morning.
Reflection. The story is a profound lesson about love, family, and the significance of memories. Through a summer spent on the farm, the narrator not only learns the value of hard work but also deeply feels the irreplaceable bond and love between their grandparents. Their love, much like the swans, symbolizes lifelong companionship, understanding, and selfless devotion. The passing of the grandparents brings sorrow but serves as a reminder that genuine love and cherished memories remain alive in the hearts of those left behind. The story conveys a message that while life is fleeting, its true meaning lies in love and the precious moments we share with family. Live fully, love sincerely, and treasure every moment with your loved ones. For these are the only things that can help us overcome loss and leave an enduring impact that will never fade. Thank you for joining Beauty in Stories for today's tale. I hope these moments have brought you meaningful insights and inspiration. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any upcoming stories. See you in the next one.
Goodbye!